Welcome to Voice of Diversity episode 2 with the wonderful and humorous Morgan-Paige Melbourne, an amazing queer and black pianist, and we're thrilled to continue this series. We began in July. We started July with Jaden Daly, who's a recent grad of Laurier in violin performance, and we're really excited to get to know Morgan some more as well too, and for her to share her story. And welcome to all of you. I'm just going to do a land acknowledgement before we begin. And in case you didn't know, I'm Mike Fan, and I'm a Masters of Opera and Voice student here at McGill, and at the Schulich School of Music. And I'm also the PGSS Equity and Diversity Commissioner, Commissaire à l'équité et à la diversité for the Postgraduate Student Society. And in particular, I manage the Equity Committee and deal with issues surrounding equity and diversity for grad students. And so this land acknowledgement is actually taken from Concordia University because I like this one better, but of course we're going to adopt it for our purposes tonight. So we would like to begin by acknowledging that McGill University is located on unceded Indigenous lands. The Kanien'kehá:ka Nation is recognized as the custodians of the lands and waters on which we gather today. Tiohtià:ke, commonly known as Montreal, is historically known as a gathering place for many First Nations. Today it is home to a diverse population of Indigenous and other peoples. We respect the continued connections with the past, present, and future in our ongoing relationships with Indigenous and other peoples within the Montreal community. Nous aimerions commencer par reconnaître que l'Université McGill est située en territoire autochtone, lequel n'a jamais été cédé. Nous reconnaissons la nation Kanien'kehá:ka comme gardienne des terres et des eaux sur lesquelles nous nous réunissons aujourd'hui. Tiohtià:ke, ou Montréal, est historiquement connu comme un lieu de rassemblement pour de nombreuses Premières Nations et aujourd'hui une population autochtone diversifiée ainsi que d'autres peuples y résident. C'est dans le respect des liens avec le passé, le présent et l'avenir que nous reconnaissons les relations continues entre les peuples autochtones et autres personnes de la communauté montréalaise. And a link that I would like to share in the chat for all of you is native-land.ca, and you can look at it for more details about the Indigenous peoples which govern the lands on which you reside if you're not in Montreal, which I know many of you are, and even not in Canada for some of the case for others, although this link only works for those in Canada, unfortunately, but always really important to remember these issues and to remember our Indigenous brothers and sisters and to keep them in our thoughts and to acknowledge that. So now that we've done that, I just wanted to say some housekeeping rules, to provide some housekeeping rules. I'm sure it'll be fine because I know most of you, but that you're welcome to keep your, let me just, my microphone just shifted. Let me just see what's happening here. Okay, I think I'm back, hopefully. Oh, the joys of Zoom. Okay, you can still hear me somewhat? Okay, excellent, good. We're going to continue. Merci, Charlotte. So obviously you can keep your video off if you like. You can even use an alias if you don't feel comfortable showing yourself. That's one of the benefits of being on Zoom versus in person, because then we don't have to. You can have a little bit more anonymity, especially because we're going to have a Q&A portion. So if you'd like to ask a question and you don't want to out yourself, then you're welcome to be anonymous. And of course, out of respect for our wonderful, beautiful guest, Morgan, who I'm going to introduce in a bit, we want to stay muted until the Q&A portion, if you like, to ask something so that we can make sure there are no uninterrupted interruptions. But most of us are Canadians, so I think we have the politeness part down. So we got to know Morgan a little bit informally at the beginning while we were waiting for others to show up, but Morgan-Paige Melbourne is a Toronto-based pianist who has competed and won numerous classes in the Kiwanis Music Festivals, OMFA, which is the Ontario Music Festival Association, including placing third in the National Canadian Music Competition 2017 for the under-23 category. Morgan has performed extensively in Toronto, Greater Toronto Area GTA, Guelph, Bahamas, and recently Montreal, and you'd be interested to know, Charlotte, also France. So she also performed at Kerner Hall in Toronto, Chateau d'Arvaux, artist residency, I can't speak, artist residency in Arquevaux, France, the Ciné Club Film Society Silent Film Festivals in Besançon, France, and Montreal, Quebec, and as well Alexina Louise Award Ceremony at the Arts and Letters Club in Toronto. Other performances include Union Station and Siamese Piano's Holiday Program Collaboration December 2019. She was a board member of the Guelph Symphony Orchestra and currently works as a collaborative pianist, assistant choir director, and teacher at Sistema Toronto and the East End Music Project. Morgan performed and spoke for our first PGSS Equity event of the year, which was the beginning of my term in June 2020, the Black and Queer Voices Open Mic, which we'll see some clips of today. And we're thrilled to continue the conversation about her experiences being an awesome queer Black performer and composer of color. So we're thrilled to have Morgan here today. I also forgot to mention the event is being recorded, but as Morgan and I are doing most of the talking, unless you choose to unmute yourself and speak, you won't be recorded, so you don't have to worry. Although on the registration there was also a clause about that, unless you had emailed me directly. But just in the know for anybody, just if that changes anything, you're welcome to change your name, mute yourself. But usually, for the most part, it's going to be Morgan and I, and it's not really going to be published super publicly, except for little sound bites and clips, mostly of the amazing Morgan speaking. So we're thrilled to have Morgan here, and we're just going to play a little clip before we start speaking with Morgan, just to keep the suspense going. And speaking of this Queer and Black Voices Matter open mic we did, this is a performance that Morgan gave us via her keyboard. It's the cadenza from the very infamous Grieg concerto, and there's a whole story about that. We might have Morgan share that story again today because it's rather spicy, and it's incredible because it's on a digital piano from Morgan's home, and it's absolutely incredible. And I've seen Morgan play in person on a beautiful grand, and it is an experience like none others. So this is only a little sample. So I'm gonna play it. Just give it. You can hear the sound. You can see it though, at least so far. Excellent. Okay, well, let's hope the sound works too. And Ruth, thanks for joining us. Excellent to see Ruth here. Oh, wrong clip. That is not Grieg, but someone even better. But I will leave that for the end. Now, where did Grieg go? Grieg is here. And I hope you enjoy the extra added comedic value of Zoom playing pranks on me. Here's the Grieg cadenza. Brava, Morgan! Oh my goodness, gorgeous, so stunning. And at the same time, though, I've been on the other end as well, where someone is introducing you, and then there's a clip, and watching yourself can be a little bit of a, of a horror because, of course, we're all perfectionists, right? But no, it was gorgeous. I hope you enjoyed it as much as we did, but I know it can be difficult watching yourself at the same time, which is something else to unpack. But oh wow, every time I watch it, it's just so moving, especially because of that month. And yes, people are giving you virtual applause and all sorts of love. But
Thank
particularly
you.
given what had happened, in July and at this beginning in the middle of this pandemic, it's just so moving to hear that power and that uh, incredible sound and your passion. And as we will discover, if you don't know already, Morgan also composes, and we will look at Morgan's compositions as well too, and talk about that too. But it's such an iconic work for classical pianist, Mount Everest to climb, and so phenomenal. So I'm where do we begin? That's just watching that, I'm just like speechless again. Just always astounded by your talent and your passion. So welcome finally. Now at long last we get to talk to you and to hear your speaking voice and to get to know you in this wonderful time together, in this wonderful safe space. And Morgan is so generous with her time and herself, and so we of course want to create a safe space for her to really feel comfortable to share about her life. Of course, I don't want Morgan to share anything that she doesn't want to, or anything too personal or career damaging and too spicy too. So no names named. But of course, we're really happy to be here and to learn more. So welcome. Hello,
Thank you
bonsoir.
so much for inviting me back. I'm very
Oh, is it
extremely
just
thrilled.
me? I can't. Just a sec. It might be just me because my mic went weird again. But I
Oh,
can't hear you. So let me just. There we go.
oh, can you hear me now?
Okay, now I can hear you. Yes.
Oh,
There we go.
okay.
I was like, no wonder Morgan's being so quiet. I can't hear her.
Just a little mouse in the corner. I can't really hear
Exactly.
anything.
Secrets of the mic.
Well, thank you so much for having me and inviting me back. I'm really thrilled to be here and to be surrounded by such wonderful individuals.
Yes, my pleasure. My hope is that as the series grows, we'll have an audience that deserves the guests that we're bringing in. But September's a busy time for our McGill grad students, as we all know, who are out in the labs and doing a lot of online classes. Our internal affairs officer, who normally does the land acknowledgements, has a class at 7 tonight, so sadly she can't be here. So it's starting to be complicated now. It's fall, but we're thrilled to have you. We're honored that you have spent your time and are here to talk with us and to share your story, which is super inspiring. So how have you been since June, since we last brought you in virtually, at least?
I've been good. It's been busy, sleeping a lot, which I'm really happy for.
Good.
um, but finding my pace again. Just been working on a few things as I have an album coming up soon, hopefully to be
Great.
released in mid-November. Been working on finalizing that, and I originally was working on the mastering, and then I'm listening to it again. Like, I'm not too sure if this works out. Then I have my sibling listening to it. They're like, "Okay, let me fix this for you." I'm like, "Thank you," because I do not have the patience. So, so now we're
Absolutely.
working on finalizing everything. So that's the main part of it. But other than that, just taking time with things and enjoying the moments where I can, but also doing a lot of reflection on just everything that's going on as well. So just trying to find that happy medium. But
Yes.
I'm doing out.
Absolutely. Oh, fantastic. And Morgan is not one to sit back and do nothing, because I know Morgan's always busy, and not just in music and with her own music, but lots of amazing projects, which is really incredible and so interesting. So did you want to talk more about, because I find it's so interesting with, do you find for yourself you have this role as this classical pianist, and then you have your other projects and your own music as well? Do you find it's all part of you, or is there a little bit of a separation in terms of who you are in one aspect and the other? Could you just talk about your kind of like breadth as kind of a multidisciplinary artist, and because it's very easy to pigeonhole someone as saying she's a classical pianist, she's a pianist, or but I feel like that doesn't just define you because you're so multi-talented and multifaceted, right?
Oh, I've definitely struggled with that for years, especially in my teens. The first part, like I've always just wanted to be, just full out classical pianist, gonna go do the whole concert world thing. That was a dream that I had, and it was something that I never stopped. But I also really had a great passion for just songwriting and just composing as well. When I was really going nitty gritty into just the performance aspect and just the studying part of it, especially I think I was about 13, 14 when I wanted to go head on into everything. That was when, at that point, where I was really struggling whether it was something I wanted to move forward with, to actually be in the classical world, just because of just how much discrimination there was at the time when I was there, and I didn't really know how to handle it, and I didn't see anybody that I could relate to, didn't really understand, okay, is it just going to be me, is there other people, right? So I felt a little bit lost. It took me a little while,
Mm.
and then my teacher introduced me to Jesse Norman, and that just opened the floodgates to
Yes.
everything. I'm like, what? There's someone that looks like me that's in this field. So that gave me a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
And then I discovered Hazel Scott, and on top of that, even Nina Simone had training in classical and jazz as well, and that led to just a whole slew of other female identifying Black individuals who I was able to look up to. I'm like, okay, you know what? Some of them, they most of them were predominantly in the jazz world, but they all had classical backgrounds, and not a lot of people knew that. And once I studied that, it's like, okay, there's potential here. It's not ain't just little old me, and there is a community out there. So I decided, you know what, I just want to focus this through. So there was a period where I just didn't do a lot of songwriting after that, or a bunch of other things, even just doing visual arts or just acting here and there, even though it was mainly for myself at the time. I just wanted to really hone one major skill, because at the time,
Mhm.
the one thing I kept hearing was, you can be a jack of all trades, but a master of none.
Right.
And that saying always had a really awkward sitting with me. It didn't really feel right. Um, so for a good few years, for most of my teens, I just focused on just piano, classical piano. And then when I was 17, 18, I was introduced to contemporary music. And that's when I'm like, whoa, okay. You mean I can play music by people that's still alive and is still really good? There's a whole
Yeah.
other world in here?
Yes.
What?
Right. Right.
And I found there was a lot more freedom with it, freedom of expression, because it's still very experimental, and there are others that need more, like a variety of interpretation with it. And yes, there's still the discipline of it to be able to, still interpret the composer's story, but you're still creating, emphasizing something new, and not having to worry that you're bringing the entire world down if you're not singing or playing something right from somebody,
Hmm.
pre 19th century. So that kind of settled my heart attack a little bit, and from there it just really expanded. Um, but the other part that was a little bit tough for me with blending just all the different together was, one side was feeling a little bit of imposter syndrome, like, if
Absolutely. Yes.
if I just classical, then but what about the rest of me,
Hmm.
right? But if I try to do pop, then how does that make me look like as a classical musician? And I felt like there's something wrong with only just going with one way. And with me, I can never just do one thing. I can't just do one thing myself. I want to explore so much more. And going into contemporary music helped me discover that. Um, and also just with parts of my family life with my dad. At the time, my dad was very he was very protective, let's just put it that way. And he was also a musician and producer and was very particular when
Wow.
with certain songs coming out. So when it came to songwriting, it was a lot at that time. I was like being bullied and dealing with a lot of other stuff. And so it was very personal to me. And often it was a lot of pressure and I didn't feel like it was the right time for me. So I'm like, okay, let me do something where he can't control and I'll probably come back later. So that's where I went to the classical route. And then again, the contemporary, when, okay, we settled our differences and then we're able to, grow from that part. So I would probably say within the past 2 years, so probably just starting last year was when I started going back into songwriting because I missed it. And I had taken a year off prior to just take off from performances and concerts because I was doing competition concerts for like 13 straight, no break. Exactly. It was just every single year. Hardly had myself, and I just really need to reflect. And when I was at the Orford Music Summer Academy,
right here in this province, yeah.
And I was studying with Andre Laplante, and I told him, because he was asking me what am I doing next, and I told him I think I need to take a break because during all that time I had like 2 major injuries and my arm didn't really heal completely, so I was still competing and still doing these things and not really allowing my body to rest. And he's just like, yeah, absolutely. It's so easy to just get caught up in everything, and so much so that you become robotic and it's no longer something that's a part of you but something that you're just forcing yourself to do because you have to, and you're afraid of perfectionism, right? So he said, absolutely, take the time that you need, it's okay. And just getting that extra confidence to wanting to just take a break. It was actually really nice. It was really nice. And of course I practiced here and there, but it was just a time I needed a lot to my brain to just settle. And from there, I was able to just reignite that interest and that love that I had for just all forms of art. And I think the EP that I released, Dear Dysphoria, was just kind of like an introduction to that. And also just experimenting with producing my own music and attempting to mix. Never done that. I've done the recording part, so it was a learning curve. But that was something that I was able to do myself entirely without ever having to actually learn properly how to use like studio equipment. So I just used my iPad for everything. And then the only thing that I didn't do was just like the photo itself. That was from a great team of my family that helped me. And same thing with this upcoming album. So it's just really experimenting with everything and just fusing the genre that I love and that I grew up with, that I trained with. And it's just something new, it's something just entirely new. And I'm really excited. And I actually haven't felt just genuinely pleased and happy without freaking out for a long time. And not to say that I haven't felt that same joy in the past, but this is like, it's just opening another chapter to something that's just blossoming, and I'm just so excited to see what else is going to happen,
Yeah,
so long story short, that's basically the essence of everything.
No, absolutely. And it's so beautiful here. And I wanted to sort of start off with that just to kind of get the scope of all that you do and all that you're involved with. And also, by the way, I'm going to put in the chat Morgan's website and her socials.
Oh, that website is actually a different one.
Oh, okay.
Here's the thing. That one,
okay,
like that.
Tell us. Is there a story here?
So, that is a very, very old website, but it has a lot of traction on Google. But I made a new website almost 2 years ago. But because there's so much traction going to that website, it hasn't caught up to my new one yet.
Okay, scratch that. Do you mind
Okay,
putting in the chat for us, and then we can play that
absolutely.
one? That way we
One
can
second.
that way everyone can stay tuned to your projects and discover your LPs and your music, because it's really fascinating and really beautiful. I didn't mean to inadvertently stumble upon
Oh
something.
no.
Yeah, there's this, and that is something we can talk about too. Is this whole world of being an online musician and everything like that. But while Morgan's doing that, it's really amazing what Morgan shared, and I saw someone applauding, speaking about strong, especially female black artists, especially in classical music. And not to blow your mind, but actually there's someone in our midst who worked with and at Tanglewood with Jesse Norman. So we better talk about that later. That's very exciting, and
That's
blew
so
my
cool.
mind
That
for
is so
sure. Yeah, so amazing. Yes, so that's fantastic. So that's the second website. But I love your socials because there's so many amazing things going on. But I wanted to just put that in so everyone can investigate and follow and share and like and support you, and all your amazing endeavors and the classical music you're doing, and also the music that you're composing. So it's incredible to hear about the music you're creating yourself as well too, because so many classical artists like me, like for example, I studied harmony and theory and basic compositional techniques and things like that. And for me, I have to say I love to write poetry, for example, but musical composition is I don't think is a gift that I've been born with. Maybe one day I'll experiment with it, but I think there's very much I think either people are not drawn to it or it's something they've been afraid to do, like you, for example. And then for you to go off and create your own music as well, so amazing. And it's very different than a lot of the classical music you play too. And I think you sort of referred to it as pop music, sort of. But what would you say? What is the genre? Is there a genre in the music you create? Is it just you and something totally new? I'd love to hear your thoughts because it's so fascinating and so exciting that you have these two sides. Because for me as well, I'm someone also who has it's been very hard to fit into a box, and I've resisted that a lot too, both in music and beyond music as well. And so I'm wondering for you, is your composing and performing your own music a place where you get to sort of tear down all the genres and just be whatever you want to be and just create, or is there a certain influence or genre that you kind of aspire to or would say that your composition falls into?
I feel like it's a little mixture of everything. For the most
Beautiful.
part, I would say I would use the word alternative because it's hard to really put anything in a box. Because
Hmm.
say pop, at least for me, that's definitely something like popular. That's a lot of it is just like studio created in a
Yes.
sense. And there's a particular sound that goes with it, even though it can be it's there's a huge variety with that. Um, with using the word alternative or saying like alternative pop with that is I find is at least it's still within that spectrum, but it's experimenting with other parts of it and using different aspects of other genres and putting them together. Is I've always had trouble trying to define what genre works best. That's why I've been using alternative. I would say probably for songwriting, I would go in that direction. And then for composition, probably just mainly contemporary with like post romanticism, I would say. But it really depends on what it is I'm writing. For the most part, because most of the works that I've done have been for silent films or
Right.
for short films that I've been working on as well. Um, so it really depends on what the theme they're going for, or based on the style, the tone of it. So it really depends. For example, there's definitely stuff that I've done where it was like a 1930s movie, silent film, and I research those styles of that period that they've used in those movies and then just build upon that so it's not something completely different, but for the audience that's there able it's like still the whole experience, so it's as if they went back in time. So that's something that I always wanted to try and do. So it's a little bit, it depends on what the project is. For my own personal stuff, I would probably say post-romantic, contemporary, mix of everything. I'm still trying to figure out alternative is what I'm still
No, no, and that's why, you don't have to put a label on it at all, and it's just interesting to hear
Mhm.
all your influences and that it's all everything and not, none of them at the same time. It's totally something new, and I think part of it is also coming from this classical training. We're kind of taught about the Baroque era and the classical era, and there are a lot of these boxes and traditions which are beautiful, and it's a beautiful heritage. But what I find so exciting as well for you is just this world where you get to create and you get to be the face of a totally different, world and sound universe, and to kind of play this music which is totally your own and not kind of handed down to us. Because of course I love Grieg, I love all these composers that we study and learn from when we're young. But as you were saying, until you sort of discovered this contemporary music and that like, oh, I can create things, I have, I can do this, I don't have to just play music that's handed down to me. We deal with a very colonial mindset a lot of times in classical music because of course it began in Europe, and it's very Eurocentric, and obviously it's music that comes from this beautiful heritage of centuries of European composers. But then there's still people composing today in the classical music world, and music that's come after 1900 and by people that are not just white artists, for example, and composers. And classical music is still historically not very diverse still in a lot of in most of the performers and the repertoire and the canon of music we perform. So it's really exciting to hear about your composition and the fact that you're doing you, and that you finally came to a point where you felt strong enough in yourself to do it and courageous enough, because it's not easy, and all the things that we're taught growing up kind of limit us in a way, right? And for you to step out and say, I'm going to do this, and clearly it's if nothing brought even more attention and success to your work and infused it. And that's what I found too. It's very surprising for me, but when I found that, oh, actually, when I just really embrace totally who I am, that's really where things come alive. And so it's really exciting to see your career as a classical artist blossoming, and plus the other projects you're working on in film and in your own compositions and albums. It's super exciting. So it's really, really interesting and fascinating. And so for you then, because you also teach as well, and I'm sure given your passion and all of your experiences, you make a much more informed, educated, and experienced educators. So because we both grew up training with the Royal Conservatory system as pianists as well. My dream was also to become a concert pianist, but things took a different route. I did a biomed degree and then went into singing, so not quite the same route as Morgan. But having come from that tradition, and list A, list B, list C, a little bit of PTSD for those Royal Conservatory music pianists out there. But for your own students, for example, do you teach them differently now, or how has that changed for you, having now, especially being a composer as well, playing your own music, and also having studied that tradition? Has that affected the way you look at your role as an educator, as a teacher of music in the world?
For me, I
Or
try.
has it been difficult too? Because of course, you feel almost a responsibility too, that as an educator, it's like I have to teach these things, or things I've been passed down. There's also that
Yeah,
that I'm maintaining and carrying it alive at the same time.
yeah, it can be tricky. But for me, because I mainly for piano, I teach like introductory piano, and then sometimes I do like kind of like a tutor at times, depending on the student. And then of course we have like the choir kids. We work individually. I personally work try to cater the education to the student's learning ability, because not everyone, everyone doesn't learn the same. Everybody has different strategies, learning abilities. So there, I do use some of like the tradition as a guide or as building
Yes.
blocks,
Right.
but I when I learn more about the child, then I'm able to cater it to them. So however they intake the information, then we do it that way. I like to still explore outside of the traditional box. So if they do, I use just one of the pieces, for example, for release. just as a guide. So as they're learning the notes, they're learning the rhythm. They're learning the notes and learning the rhythm. So I use that piece, for example, to help them learn as they go. So they don't have to learn how to play it the right way, but something as a building block. So some of them work best with seeing a piece in front of them and just analyzing it and doing it that way as well. But for the most part, uh, it's yeah, it can be tough. Like with the Western tradition, yes, it's beautiful and absolutely, but there are still a lot of aspects that's missing from it.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
of course, growing up with just going through list A, B, C, D, and all that lovely stuff, it just categorizes everything for you essentially. But it's so easy to forget that there were a ton of other composers of color that were at that period as well. And that's something you don't really realize until you do the research yourself. And
Yes, we're
so
not
that's
taught
why
that. It's not taught to
we're not,
us.
that's
Exactly.
something that the books need to be changed. They need to be altered to show that, right? Because of course, a lot of the times that happened, they were literally just burned in the fire because they didn't want a person of color composing these works, right? If they didn't like it, they just chuck it away. And so much of that history is lost, but some of them have been preserved, So that's why I like to try and keep things open and share those historical aspects about it after going through the technical things as well. So the basics are always good. It's always good, but just remembering to expand when you can, when they are ready for that,
Yeah.
and not because we're living in the world now where people are no longer staying quiet about anything. You know,
Yes.
they're building that confidence and sharing their story and sharing what it is that they know and speaking against what's wrong, right? And yeah, we've had these things almost every turn of the decade, or well, every turn of like 5 years, I would say, when we come together. The only difference now is that during quarantine, everybody's at home and they can see more within the media, and it's readily accessible, right? So it's just these little things that's just showing that it's changing, right? And we can work within that and don't have to conform to every single aspect. So with that, that's something I can relay on the kids that I'm teaching and
Absolutely.
bring different aspects. And still when we want to study other cultures, we make sure that we bring somebody in from that community to work with us so that we don't do it willy-nilly just saying, oh, this looks cool, okay, let's do this, but we can't go in without that knowledge, right? That's completely disrespectful and appropriating everything that they've held dear for as a tradition for such a long time. So just with anything, same way that we've been told to research these composers through and through needs to be done for everything else.
Yes, exactly. Like McGill, for example, Opera McGill, they reimagined their season and they're bringing in an opera written by a black contemporary of Mozart's. Where were these stories? Why was that not taught to us in music history classes?
Yeah.
We know Mozart and Haydn and Beethoven's work so well, but there's so much over the centuries which is lost, and it's
Yeah.
beautiful that you have such a passion for education as well too, because that's the next generation. That's so important. I think if I had a teacher like Morgan-Paige Melbourne, would my experiences as a pianist have been different? Because I had carried a lot of baggage as a pianist that I think ultimately kind of influenced my decision not to, pursue that path. Because it does box you in as well. There's a lot of discipline and regimen that is involved in that path. And speaking of which, I really resonated with what you said earlier about how you didn't even know it was like a dream you could have to, compose your own music and to play new music because of so much of what you were taught or saw growing up. And, both of us grew up in Guelph for the most part. So were you born in Guelph also, by the way? I don't think I've ever asked you.
I, I was actually born in Huntsville.
Ah, I was born in Edmonton, so yeah, we're frauds. I've always had that weird problem. It's like I've lived in Guelph the longest, but am I really from Guelph? Do I want to be? No offense, I'm a little bit of a snob. Sometimes I run away from my Guelph time, but
Oh yeah, no, I was born in Huntsville because my parents were entertainers at the resorts at Deerhurst Resort there. So that's how I
uh,
was. Yeah, that's why we were there.
interesting. Yeah,
Yeah.
so I exactly, and then eventually our families found their way to Guelph, and we kind of were really got our, I guess, musical starts there. And so growing up in a small town like that, I know from my experience, also being a performer of color and a musician of color, young student of color growing up, it was not exactly a very diverse city, let's say. Small Ontarian town, very typical in Canada. Not that it was a really terrible place to grow up either, but also the musical community was very small and not very diverse and not very innovative. So, could you just talk about your experience? And then in the end, surprise, surprise, you're in Toronto, I'm in Montreal. We did the classic artist thing, and we got up and went to the big city. So, and at the same time, I love to visit my family and friends in Guelph, but there's certain limits and certain experiences where it's difficult for an artist of color. So I'm wondering if you, because we have this connection, not to to roast Guelph or anything, but just I'm interested to hear your experiences growing up and in that kind of setting, because it's a little bit of a strange experience, I'd imagine.
Yeah, I think you summed everything right there. I will say this prior to talking about it now. Guelph has improved, I would say, within the last decade. Within the last
Guelph
decade, they
tourism, we're sorry. We're you're a beautiful city, and it's beautiful. It's getting every year. It's getting more and more beautiful and diverse.
it's getting better. Y'all done a good job. Pat yourself on the back. But definitely, whew, yeah. Moved to Guelph in January 2000. Yeah. It was. Of course, we had our good moments and bad moments. I would say for the most part, my parents, again, they were very protective because they were afraid for us. They were afraid for our safety and our well-being. So much so that we weren't allowed to do hardly anything. I wasn't allowed to have friends or people over or go to other places. And there were a lot of times where um, we they themselves felt ostracized in many parts of Guelph. So we just kept to ourselves for the most part, and that was both like mentally, emotionally draining, especially dealing with my parents, um, just they themselves dealing with their own trauma and from years prior to that, and then going to Guelph and working with that, everything piled on top of each other, and no one was really seeking, um, therapy at the time. So
Mhm.
they didn't really communicate it properly. So it was a lot of things happening on top of each other. And of course, in school, I was one out of three Black kids in the entire school system. With
Sounds familiar.
school within, within within the school there, and it was tough, and it was very interesting where people automatically thought that the three Black kids were all siblings. We're like, no, we're not related
Right.
whatsoever. So they assumed that, okay, you must be brother and sister. No. So that was a fun time.
Yeah.
Yeah, I of course got bullied in school, um, and trying to find my way. And there are things that, I tried to do to fit in, but obviously that backfired. I mean, when you're a kid, you just want to, at times you just want to feel accepted, and I didn't know what to do. So that was very confusing for me. Yeah, I was called names. I was called a monster at one point, and just yeah, it was a tough time, and there was a point where even the kids, when I was in middle school, the kids like found my family's YouTube, and then they started like verbally harassing my family
Oh my
online. That
right.
was like a whole other thing, and it's one thing to bully me, but like don't go to my family. That was
Off limits. Yes.
just don't do that. Competitions in Guelph and Stratford. Uh, let's say I got it from the parents and the teachers and the kids.
You mean like the parents
Uh,
of the other children competing as well?
yeah,
Yeah.
the
And
parents
also,
of the children
yeah.
competing, yeah, the children and then the teachers.
And the
My
junior,
mom and I,
well, I think you
yeah,
had mentioned this
yeah,
last time. Yeah.
yeah. So all three groups, my mom and I got discriminated against consistently
Yes.
every single would go to, and they would say things before I would have to literally go up to perform 10 minutes before or very close to it. There was a particular teacher that just hated my guts, and I had no idea why. And she would find every single way to humiliate me, and to make me feel so bad. And when I went to my other teacher afterwards, and I told her like some of the situations. So I saw my worked with my second teacher almost my entire teenage years. And when I started working with her when I was 14, she said, "Oh yeah, no, she doesn't like me too. So you're with me now, so you're gonna get hate from everybody." Um, you know, because she was known for having her students like winning a lot of the competitions, right? And people did not like that. And
Right.
now that she like a black kid involved in that too, so that just kind of like added on to everything. It took a while to really gain people's respect in terms of
Yeah.
me as
Once
just
they
as
heard
a
you
student.
play and, opened their ears, I mean, it was pretty obvious the talent and the passion and the intellect. So once they got over themselves, but
Yeah. So I would say I think when I was 17, 16, 17 was when it finally settled down a little bit. It settled down a little bit. But it took a long time. And there was even at one point, even an adjudicator when I was 10, when I played, when I was 10? No, I was 11, sorry. Adjudicator when I was 11, an older white gentleman. And he said, I was so surprised that a black kid could even play this way. I'm like,
that is not a
okay.
compliment, mister.
So,
It
you
may seem
think
like a
that
compliment.
to a student that you were adjudicating, that is like not professional at all.
No.
So I was not, I was surprised by that. I'm like, okay. So, just going off topic for a little bit, just this
No,
whole
this is
thing
all
where
on topic. This is what we're here to talk about, and what we need to be talking about more, and what people need to be hearing more
yeah,
of.
absolutely. So the one thing that I always found a little interesting, especially within the height of the social justice movement, within the past few months, a lot of people were worried about telling their children about racism, and oh, they're too young for this.
Hmm.
But you're never too young to learn about this,
Yeah,
because I knew my very first experience getting discriminated that I could remember. I was 5.
exactly.
I was
If not before,
right.
it's just you
So
don't remember it even probably.
exactly, exactly. So unfortunately you're never too young, and my parents prepared me for that when I was 4, right? So this is something like there are different ways for educating children, but you're never too young, unfortunately, because that's just the world we live in.
Yes.
It's the bitter truth. So going into these competitions, yeah, I was very surprised and just really hurt from what was being said to myself and my mother. But I it wasn't surprised at all, because that was something I was already used to. So I just did my thing and got it done. So having the fact of being able to just perform without trying to get distracted from everything. I learned that from a young age, because I had to try and block whatever shit was coming in my ear before going on stage. So I'm like, okay, that was said. Okay, yeah, put it out there. You'll cry about it later. Just go on stage and do your
Right.
thing. Because the other problem was, like a lot of like especially a lot of people just had that thought that as a black girl I have a lot of attitude, or
Right.
I'm very sassy, so I don't ever cry or have emotions, or when I speak my mind then I'm too loud.
Yeah,
So I
angry
got that,
black woman stereotype.
right.
And I've
I
even
got
read
that.
about how in hospitals that traditionally, especially during pregnancy, a lot of black women are mistreated, or their complaints and things like, and their issues are ignored. You can see in the statistics that
Yeah,
bias. Sorry to
absolutely.
interrupt you.
So it's yeah, no, it's quite all right. No, absolutely. It's very unfortunate, you know. And oftentimes, like for example, even with my dad passed away with two forms of cancer, and of course, looking at him at the forefront, he doesn't look like he's sick, right?
Yeah.
He doesn't look it, you know. And there were times when he, you know, went to his doctors, like even before that, just trying to figure out, okay, there's something going on here. I don't know what it is. So this was even before he was diagnosed. He went to like medical professionals, like, okay, I want to get this checked out. But they're like, oh no, there's no point. You know, you'll actually need a plastic surgeon to get rid of that. You know, um, but it turned out that he was basically near stage 4 at the time they actually decided to take him to do that. And even throughout the stages when he needed to, um, you know, get other checkups for something because he noticed there were more lumps coming up on his body, and they're like, "Oh, don't don't worry about it." But it's like every time you come up with something else. You know, it may have been in a joking way for them, but that was still serious because they were actually taking time to investigate, right? So they automatically think that he was complaining about everything, but he
Absolutely.
just generally taken out, and it turned out that it was something worse. You know, so it's a really tough thing, and oftentimes, like, for me, I was afraid to speak up for many years because of just the assumption people had, and whether I would say something, they wouldn't
Yeah.
believe me. So
Yes.
I stayed about a lot of things. Even I didn't tell my family a lot of things, especially in my teens, because I felt like nobody would believe me. I felt like I couldn't talk to anybody. So I just, because I couldn't talk about things, I either put it in my songwriting or I put it in the piano.
Yes.
Um, my
Yes.
songwriting was personal, that I wasn't ready for it to be out there or in the way that
Yeah.
my dad
So
took time.
vulnerable. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why I stopped the songwriting and I just went head over heels, full throttle piano. Because the one thing that really helped me was being able to sing what's in my heart using the keys by itself without having to say anything. Because you can still touch somebody's soul with a textless melody.
Absolutely.
How you how with the hammer hit strings it can affect anybody in any way possible. And that was something that I really enjoyed exploring. So when I was afraid to use my voice, the piano was my voice for so many years,
Absolutely
and it
beautiful.
still is. It still is, honestly, because there are times I'm like hella nervous to say things, but now I'm just like, okay, I can really give two shits about it now. So I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna say what's on my mind. And there are times where some of my family members are worried because I'm not, I'm not holding myself back anymore. I'm like, you know what? No, I'm like, I know what the repercussions are, but this is who I am. This is the community I'm a part of, and I'm not going to stay quiet anymore. Whether it is speaking or putting it through songs, however somebody uses your voice, it's still so important and it's still so vital. So whatever way you're comfortable with doing it, it can be done, which is something I discovered. It can be done through piano. Just the fact that
Absolutely.
I'm who I am playing it, that
Yes. It's already a statement.
that already
And
says
then
a
to play
lot.
it so well and beautifully and powerfully, like I'm just bowled over, you know. That's just yeah, exactly. Stunning, stunning.
So
Amazing, incredible experiences, and you're just so eloquent, which is why I was like, we need to share your story and have more people hear about your experiences and also your perspective because you've taken such a strong and positive and um, you know novel approach to the work and to your performing and have not been a shrinking violet and just to say, you know, this is how it is, but you're really being the change and being that voice and being that passion and force in the world, which is incredible. And I mean, this is a whole other conversation in itself, but I'm wondering as well if you could speak about your queer identity and also being, you know, we've discussed so much about your experiences as a woman of color, which is already a very, you know, hot topic, and there's a lot of experiences that comes with as well. But having also this um, added diverse element of being queer, how has that impacted you, and how has that manifested in your life? Huge question, but yeah, just wondering if you could speak about that as well too.
Oh, absolutely. Let's see. Well, I've definitely knew something was up with me from as young as I can remember. I've always just
Same.
loved. I've always loved people.
Yes.
No matter the gender, no matter the race. Just if your heart is good, then that's all I need. You know. So I noticed that it just didn't matter who it was, and I had crushes on both male and female identifying people. Um, again, for as long as I can remember. But it was tough coming out to those closest to me based on their viewpoints
Yes.
and very, 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 very strong viewpoints. And so I just kept it to myself. But however, the same people that had strong viewpoints that already knew that I was bisexual, essentially, right? Because it's like other people know before you do. That's just normally how
Yeah.
it goes
Yes.
sometimes,
Yeah. Exactly.
you know?
Then why didn't I come out
So
sooner? you
right,
know?
I never really came officially like came out to anybody because it's
Right.
just who I was
Yeah.
basically. Besides just like a few family members, but of course it took them a while and a lot of very difficult moments. For the most part, just the fact that they didn't want to actually believe that I am queer. There was a lot of denial and a lot of just underlying homophobia jokes that just hit really hard. Um, and so again, that was at that same time where I felt like I couldn't say anything. So I came out or mentioned it when I was 16. So
Mhm.
that was still a time where I didn't tell anybody
Right.
at all.
Right.
Um, so it really took. I think I came out of my shell for just everything when
Yes.
I 21. So I
Right.
was just really tired of hiding. Honestly, I was just tired of putting a veil in front of who I was, and I was just ready to just be my own person and not be of what other people would think about it. Because they have their viewpoints. That's fine. They have every right to it, but this is who I am, and so if you don't want to talk to me anymore, that's okay. But if you want a conversation, a civil conversation, a respectful conversation about it, then I'm open to that. I don't shut people out of my life because I know they themselves have to work out with it for them, but
Yeah.
I I've already dealt with that. You know, and luckily I've been able to just really embrace my queerness when I moved to Toronto. I
Yes.
when
Exactly.
Yeah,
Once you got out of Guelph and,
once you
because
get
it
out of
kind of
Guam,
holds, yeah, because it holds you back in a way, and it's not really that other people hold you back, it's that you feel that you have to wear, at least I felt that I had to wear like a straitjacket living there in a sense, because there's only so much that you can really do in a city that doesn't have as many resources or as many openly queer people, you know?
yeah, and also it would just felt like it's just that next step that needed to be taken, right? It's as if I went through all these stages. I peeled all the onion layers off of
Yes.
it. I'm ready to just start new, and
Yes.
I just need to start anew. And so moving to Toronto did that for me. However, it was going to work out, I just needed to get out. And that was just mainly for me emotionally and for my own mental state of mind. And that was another part of the best thing that happened to me within my life. There were many great parts that brought me to here. And that is something that I truly value. And it just feels like a really great blessing that I can still do what I do and what I love to do and make out of it. But that's not something that happens all the time.
Yes.
And I'm extremely grateful for that, you know. So however long I'm able to do it, I want to do it to the greatest extent I can, however I can, until it is done. Then I know that I've been able to live my life without regrets.
Yes, absolutely, and totally and completely who you are too, because it wasn't so long ago that Ellen was fired for coming out as a lesbian, and and so many of the discrimination, and it still exists today. But to see people like us, be able to work and study and to grow as artists openly, as I mean, the person of color part is pretty obvious, the visible minority part, but being openly queer as well, it's a blessing that we are. Oh, thank you. It's so great to see you, Ruth, and thanks for dropping by. And definitely, if you want to stay in contact, reach out. I'll connect you as well, because Morgan's such an inspiration. Um, but yes, absolutely, and it's so inspiring as well to hear that. And from what I've gathered, because I was going to ask about it, but I think you answered it, because growing up with so much of that kind of repression from outside forces, but also within, the internalized homophobia, internalized racism based on those voices you heard from outside, it sounded like you're running from yourself a lot, and I definitely experienced that too. But it sounds like you came to a point where you finally just embraced who you are with a vengeance and with a passion, and I think it comes across so much in your playing and in the beautiful photos and videos you're in, because you just have such this energy and this presence and this emotion that has clearly come from years of experiences, which is just so powerful and inspiring, that comes through. And especially because now you unleash it with its full fury, and it's so exciting and so brilliant, so inspiring. And we could talk for the whole night, but I wanted to show a clip of you performing one of yours aforementioned pieces, compositions. And in the meantime, I wanted to shift it also to more of an audience participation section if anyone had any questions while the video is playing, for you to ask Morgan. And if you don't feel comfortable sharing it on video or on audio, you can also type it in the chat. There's already been some wonderful contributions from Branka, who is a poetess. And so here is a clip of Morgan playing her composition At First Glance from her EP Dear Dysphoria. And if you need to take a little breather as well, then you're welcome to also. And get those questions ready. just stunning, so stunning. Especially hearing so many of the experiences you went through, and I'm just, for me, having grown up in Guelph, picturing some of the experiences I had as well too. It's just, brings a lot into focus, um, and it's beautiful to hear these two sides of you, because the Grieg, and then we have the Morgan-Paige Melbourne original. So it's just stunning, and so I hope some of you have questions. Otherwise, I have plenty more I want to ask Morgan as well. Marianne is saying that she loves this, and she can hear it as a film score. And we've talked a little bit of how you've done some composition for short film and for film. And is it on your album? So maybe let you talk about that more. It's from a previous release, but you also have upcoming music. So maybe if you could talk a little bit about that, and where people can find more out about your EPs and your music, your compositions in particular.
Oh, certainly. Yes, thank you. Yes, so that's from my Dear Dysphoria EP. So there are 4 songs on the EP. So that's that one that you listened to, that you heard is At First Glance. And then there are others called The Night Before, Little Puppet Dysphoria, and there's one more. Oh, I gave it an Italian name, but for some reason I can't remember what it's called. That is so bad.
It's on the tip of my tongue too. I had seen it on YouTube as well.
Yes. Momento di Interlude. Yeah, yes. Momento di Interlude. So it was like a moment of interlude. Yeah. It took me a minute, but I remember that. I was like, you would think you remember the titles when you write it yourself. Like sometimes it just gets out of my head. But yes, that piece in particular, At First Glance, I wrote it for a dedication to a friend of mine who one of the closest friends I made moving to Toronto, and he definitely had a really great impact in terms of what I want to do creatively, and also even photography wise. So he was actually the same person that did my photo shoot for Dear Dysphoria and for my upcoming album, for Dear Serenity, my upcoming album. So he did the photo shoots for that. And what I wanted to attempt to capture is his love for minimalism. He likes things very simple, yet very advanced in a way. So it's kind of like that blend of different things. And he also loves films as well. So I just wanted to try and emulate that as best as I can. So just showing the simplicity and romantic melody as best as I could. That was mainly part of that. And how I wrote that, it's just based on just the impact on actually meeting for the first time, because we met on Instagram, but we actually met and that was just something that was just really, really cool. And then there's just one night where we went to a piano concert, and it was just, we had so much fun. So it was just telling of our experience going out that night, and we had a blast, and I still consider him as one of my greatest friends to this day. And that was really special for me. But the album in general, just a little tidbit for everything. Dear Dysphoria is actually a prelude to my upcoming Dear Serenity. So with Dysphoria, it's just the dissatisfaction with how things are, and just being honest that not everything is always good. So it's just really exploring the dark side of mental health and trying to find your way through that. So most of the songs on the album are a reflection of some of my experiences. There's one that is called The Night Before. It is a mixture of instrumental with some lyricism in it. And that's per song in particular. Honestly, it was completely improvised. I recorded just on the spot of what I felt, because that was like the night before something just very tragic that happened, and very like for me, and I didn't know how to deal with it. So I just did it on the spot. It's because I have a tendency of playing things and not recording it. So I'm like, you know what, Morgan, just record this just in case. And I ended up just using the audio from that part. And the lyrics didn't come later on. until I think a good 3 4 months afterwards. Um, the next song on that EP is called Little Puppet Dysphoria, so that's playing on the title. So it's like the voice in your head is telling you, I'm taking over your entire body and you are my puppet and I'm going to make you feel completely miserable and this is what's going to happen. And it's just the character in that story is trying to break free from the puppet master essentially. So that's the focus on that one. And then Momento di Interludio, that's just a short tidbit with that has a choral influence but still pianistic elements inside of it. So it's just trying to find just a moment of peace, just trying to find a breath in between all the craziness that's happening. Um, so then um, with that coming before Dear Serenity is just trying to find that peace, trying to find that tranquility in everything. So there is a hint of hope, but it's not finalized yet, but it's knowing that there is a way to find that joy, to find that happiness, but still being honest with needing to acknowledge the struggles that you're going through. And some of the songs on there have been singles that I've released over the last couple months that have been in relation to the Black Lives Matter movement, the MMIWG as well. So just a lot of um, just the need for the social justice, just to be able to move forward and to make that change that needs to be done. So a lot of the songs on that album reflect those experiences, both directly and indirectly, as well as a love letter to somebody who wants to be there for you, but you don't know how to accept their help. So it's just basically it's like a love letter to yourself and trying to find your way in everything. I think that's how I can describe it without giving everything away. So it's just a little bit
Amazing.
of everything.
That's
So
incredible
again,
because
it's
you know we
oh sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
no, 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 keep going. Uh, we're so
Yeah.
Canadian. We're
So
like, no, you go, no, you go.
I was just gonna say it's a mixture of instrumental and lyric based songs as well. So you get a fusion of both things happening. So
It's
yeah.
amazing because especially with instrumental music, we all come up with that story in our heads. But it's so fascinating to hear about your storylines for your concept, and it's so rich and so fascinating. And I know Do Dysphoria is on YouTube, but is there a way like iTunes or Spotify? Is what kind of how's your EP going to be released? Where can we find it? How can we support you more importantly? As an artist and and pay for your music. What's the best way to support you?
So my EP is available on all streaming platforms and is also on Bandcamp as well. I do have Say Their Names out as a single, um, available on all platforms too, but any proceeds made from Say Their Names are going directly to causes that support the movements for to help better everything, because that song in particular was set for that tone as well. Um, the information I put the information in the description under Say Their Names for in the YouTube link there for all of that as well, and also that goes to the Bandcamp too. Um, but Dear Serenity will be released on all platforms, and it will be on Bandcamp as well. And since Say Their Names will be on that album, again, parts of the proceeds will go to those movies as well to support it. Yeah.
Absolutely. It's wonderful. And I hope you all run out and tell your friends and spread the word about this incredible artist. And are there any other questions anyone wanted to ask? Is everyone feeling shy? Yes, wonderful. Yes, I'm sure Marion is very busy, as usual, and out being the wonderful diva and wonderful mentor that she is. Did Marion have some time to speak about Jesse Norman, or maybe we'll connect the dots later?
Oh, you thought I worked with her. I was just there worshiping at the feet of her. I was
Oh,
a
you're so
fellow there. Yeah, and we were lucky
the
enough.
year that she performed, right, right.
Yeah, and I was really, really lucky. She was an idol of mine. I even had a dream once that I was inside her body singing with an orchestra. And it was like I was sailing, sailing on the sound. But when I was bartending at Roy Thompson Hall, the ushers were really nice in those days, and they would let the bartenders sneak in because they knew we were all musicians. Most of us were musicians, and if there was someone that we really wanted to see, they would let us in to stand at the back. So I got to hear her twice in Roy Thompson Hall doing Mahler. And then she was down in Tanglewood for my first year there, and she did the Wesendonck Lieder, and she did the Jeremiah Symphony of Bernstein. And just because we were fellows, we got to go to her dress rehearsal for the Wagner. And one of the fellows, an American guy who was just one of the most hilarious people of all time and had gall to burn, just went, "Come on, we're going to meet her." And we were like, "What? Come on, we're going up." And so we just went up to the stage, and she always struck me as royalty, the way she carried herself, the way she sang. And just getting to meet her and just the way she used her hands when she talked, everything about her was artful and graceful and regal. And then I went to hear her at the library last winter and spoke to her afterwards just to, say I was there in Tanglewood and thanks for the music all the years. And she just impresses you so much because, again, gracious, just one of the most gracious people I've ever been in the presence of. So I was lucky, but no, I did not get to work with her. I probably would have passed out at that point.
Yeah, exactly. You want to be here with us.
I don't think anything would have come out.
Exactly. Exactly, but yeah, I just want to connect the dots there because I mean, who hasn't Jesse Norman inspired? And if you're not familiar with Jesse Norman or with the great Black opera singers, it's an experience, and if only we still had her too.
The best, Ella Fitzgerald, the best singer that ever walked on the planet. Come on.
Absolutely, a human, yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing, Marianne, and thanks for being here.
Oh, nice to see you and meet you.
Thank you, Marianne.
Keep up the awesome work.
Thank you, Marianne.
Thank you so much.
You're the sweetest.
Bye.
Bye. Ciao. Wonderful. Oh, that's amazing. Amazing to hear that story and to celebrate that queen that has inspired so many generations of artists.
Oh, she's amazing.
She's amazing. Such an inspiration. Exactly. And any other questions from anyone else here? Don't be shy. We have a few here. But I wanted to ask you as well before we wrap up because time flies, it's already almost 8:30 and where does the time fly? It's just, I thought, in June it's like, oh, well, we'll have so much to talk about here. And it's like, well, you could just be our guest every month for the next year. But I wanted to ask you in particular because we're here in Montreal and Charlotte is in France. You had mentioned, well, it's in your bio that you have performed in Montreal and France. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about this connection, seeing as we're here representing McGill and Montreal and the Francophone community as well. Really curious to about those experiences.
It was awesome. It was awesome. Definitely got to practice my French. Haven't spoken in a while, so that was it was fabulous. It was so much fun. Back in it was a while ago. Back in 2019. It feels like 2019 was like 5 years ago. Where things just seems like it was just a long time with the quarantine. Oh man. Anyway, back so it was February 2019, and I think it was just the beginning of that month. I work with an agent on and off, so I'm able to still do my projects, but for anything larger than that, then I get help from them. So he sent me a text saying, hey, there is my friend owns a silent film company in Montreal, and they're putting on a show in Fergus in 2 weeks. Would you want to try doing that? I'm like, okay, I've never done one before, but I'll try it. So I got in contact with his friend a couple days later, and he kind of gave me the breakdown of how everything works. He's like, okay, you can choose to fuse some classical pieces with some of your improvisation, or you can just write it yourself. I'm like, okay. And I'm watching the films that he sent, because we did the Three Kings of Comedy. So we did Charlie Chaplin. Then we did I can't remember the other two names at the moment, but Charlie Chaplin was one of the movies. And I was listening to while I was watching the movies, and I noticed, okay, I'm not quite feeling blending in other pieces, but I can write it myself. So I just wrote like guidelines to work with, and then improved on top of it. And then I also worked with a cellist as well. So I kind of gave them guidelines of what I'm doing, so then I can conduct what the cellist will be doing as well. So 2 weeks we worked in Fergus, and then after the show, the guy that I was collaborating with the silent film company, he said, "Hey, I noticed you're going to France for your artist residency. Within that same month, 2 weeks later, we have a festival going on there. Would you like to play?" I'm like, "Oh, sure, why not? I guess I'll be there." And luckily, it was about 2 hours away from where I was staying in Châteauroux for that. So we went to Besançon, and we were supposed to do tours in Dijon as well, and one other town, but we weren't able to. So we just did 3 days in Besançon, and that was just so cool. That was just so much fun. So it was a 2-hour concert with a mixture of short films, just spanning from all genres of the spectrum. So we had comedy, we had drama, we had documentary, we had horror, and we had like romantics as well. So that also gave me the chance to just write for all these different types of genres based from films from like 1918 to 1920 and up to 1930. So that was just so cool. So from then on, he asked me a few months later in October, saying, "Hey, we're doing the Hunchback of Notre Dame, the 1920s version, in Montreal. Would you like to do it?" Sure, let's do that. So we did it a weekend, and that was so much fun. That was my first feature-length film, almost entirely improvised. I just wrote little snippets and improv on top of that, and worked with a violinist and a clarinetist for those parts, and they were amazing. They just followed my lead of what they were doing, did the effects on top of it. That was super cool. So it was definitely, like with all the silent film stuff, being able to work with other musicians for that, and knowing and just having that opportunity to be like the musical director for it, that was just cool. I was like terrified because I wasn't too sure how that was gonna go, but just going with the flow, and even not. I think this is just how powerful the art and music can be, where you don't know anybody, but you can still gel so well. It's just the communication it just blew my mind, right? Because even like in France, I worked with like a cellist and a clarinetist, and we took a few days to get to know each other, but we didn't really have that much time. Like the first time we met, we met up for food just before, and then we had rehearsals that same day. And luckily they played together before, but with me coming in, everything just blended. Just the communication just worked out, and that was just something that I was just mind blown. It was really cool. So we were supposed to do a tour this summer, but we're hoping to just reschedule it for next year. Fingers crossed if things work out. But that's the silent film world is a whole new chapter, and just being able to experiment with all the different sounds and the different genres, and just blending things and fusing things together. It's just this balance of creativity that's just happening at once, And it was cool. It was cool.
Wow, what an amazing experience. It's wonderful to tie in with us as well. Yes, and Charlotte says we can come back to France. That would be awesome to see you perform live. And as well,
Oh,
she wrote
I
a
would love.
comment. Yes, for you in France. Yeah, hook her up, Charlotte. And also earlier, Charlotte had written in French. I'll translate. When I listened to this piece the first time, it completely transported me. It really touches my heart. So, and
I
Charlotte
saw
has
that.
very good.
Merci beaucoup, j'apprécie tellement. Ça, c'est vraiment, vraiment. Merci.
C'est très émouvant, très bouleversant. Wonderful, fantastic. Well, it's 8:30, and so we should probably wrap it up. Although we could talk for hours about Morgan and her breadth of incredible experiences and passion and projects and music, and it's so exciting. And we'll wrap it up. And of course, if you know we don't have to have an abrupt ending, but at least the official event we can wrap up. And I just wanted to thank her for her time and her generosity and her spirit here today. It's been so wonderful and so thrilling as usual, and hopefully the one of many future collaborations for us, I'm sure, because I'm such a number one fan. And of course we invite you to check out her website, the updated website she posted, and her socials as well, and her music, her original music, as well as her performances. I see you're also, I got an email actually from the Royal Conservatory saying you're going back to Kerner Hall in Toronto, which is beautiful, I believe. So that's super exciting, and just one of many future performances that are going to continue dazzling the world. And we invite you as well to stay tuned on our social media, PGSS Equity, and for our future Voice of Diversity series and all of our upcoming events and things like that. And I'm going to be changing my background because on Monday we actually have a book club, which is new, an Equity and Allyship book club. We'll be reading Black Writers Matter, and thank you so much as well, Valerie. I'm thrilled that you've enjoyed the event as well. And we invite you for that. That's going to be a monthly event, and we're going to be having more Voice of Diversity events. And I just wanted to share as well that we have our next guest in October confirmed. It's going to be Kama Lamaquerelle, who's a local Montreal-based Mauritian Canadian poet, but also just like Morgan, total multi-talent, multifaceted, incredible queer performer, and their first poetry book was recently released by a local Montreal publisher, and it's also going to be our book club pick for next month as well too. And the book club is being scheduled, but the event with Kama is going to be also a Thursday, and it's going to be October 29th. And it's going to be at noon, so we're going to be bringing it out of the evening for this event, as it very depends on our guests and all sorts of other factors. But we hope to see you all there, and invite your friends. We really hope to, have more audience members to participate in the joy and the wonder and the beauty of these amazing artists and their energy. And it's challenging with people in different time zones and busy McGill students, but we really hope to keep the momentum going and to have more people be enlightened and learn from and be inspired by these incredible stories and these incredible artists. So thanks everyone for joining us. I know a few have already dropped off, but we have a few left, and thank you again so much, Morgan. It's been such a pleasure and such an inspiration.
Thank you so, so much for inviting me. This has been absolutely wonderful. Thank you so much.
It's been my pleasure, and thank you so much again for your time and for your energy. It's been so inspiring for me, and I'm sure everyone else. And that's a wrap.